Now, it's easy to think we are missing out on one piece of advice, that one piece of musical wisdom that will help everything click or complete the jigsaw puzzle of learning and getting better at playing jazz guitar. In today's video, I want to share with you 3 things that really help me progress on the instrument. They are all things that help improve my playing or the way that I practice. Now let's get on to today's topic. If learning a jazz standard was a 3-course dinner, then how would you order learning the chords, the melody, and then practicing soloing over the chord changes? My process is, first off, for that starter, you've got to learn the melody. Secondly, for the main, got to know those chords really well. And finally, for dessert, you have your soloing. Now, I used to gloss over steps 1 and 2, the melody and the chords, and not really take my learning far enough, because let's face it, soloing, for some reason, has more appeal for a lot of people. But actually, most of the time on a gig, I'm actually accompanying or playing a melody. Soloing is a smaller part of it, and I think doing it well is really heavily reliant upon thorough work on the melody and the chords and linking those 2 things together. Now, you may wish to later check out my video on how to link the melody to the chords of a standard. Now, many jazz songs share very similar chord progressions, and chords without a melody, that doesn't form a meaningful song. And I actually find that if I'm listening to music on Spotify, say, I often skip songs if I don't know the tune. It's a bit like when you're at a gig and you don't really connect with a band until they play a song that you're familiar with. Now, being patient with a song and knowing you're in a process or on a journey with that tune, that to me translates to, well, I don't expect to set the world on fire with soloing unless I have a deep understanding of the melody and chords. That for me is being able to play without really thinking about it. And I think this comes down to taking things far enough. I've spoken about this topic before on this channel, but the model of unconscious competence is very relevant here. With that being the following, we start out from a position of unconscious incompetence where we don't know we're doing something wrong. Say we don't know that our timing's off with the melody, or we then move forward to conscious incompetence where we are aware of what we're doing wrong, but we're not able to put it right yet. Then we move into the state of conscious competence where we're doing things correctly now, but we're really having to think a lot about it to make it happen correctly. And then finally, we take it to unconscious competence. We can do it correctly without thinking. Now just think of the things you can already do on the guitar, like this. I bet you can play an open E minor chord without looking or thinking about it. And there's many activities in our daily lives, such as driving and brushing our teeth, where we work in exactly the same manner. Now, to take a standard through that process takes patience, self-awareness, and being organised. Now, by that I mean organising your practice so that you stick with things long enough to see them through to that final stage of unconscious competence. Now, I would define that as the melody and the chords from memory. You've internalised the sound of the chord changes. Just imagine the sound of the song and you can hear those changes in your head. You know how to navigate any tricky spots in the changes, and you can play without too much effort. Now, for me, this means you'd be able to play this with someone else. And if you try and jam a standard with someone and you're following a chart, I don't think you'll be as present as you need to be to play with someone else. You'll be so wrapped up in what's coming up next on that chart, whether you're reading the chords or the melody, and that will distract you from the important job of listening to who you're playing with and locking in with them. So in your own practice with the standard you're working on, maybe it's time to skip dessert and eat everything on the plate from your starter and main first. Now, you might find my Patreon page of interest in regards to this, in which I focus on 1 standard a month. This month's standard has been Autumn Leaves, and July's standard will be Summertime. If you ask most people what instrument first comes to mind when they think of the genre of jazz, I can't imagine many would say guitar. I'd imagine the top answer would be saxophone. Now, whilst we naturally gravitate towards guitar players, it's easy to neglect other instruments. I know I did. It wasn't till I realised that my favourite guitar players were often actually imitating their heroes who weren't guitar players that I started to take an interest in other instruments. Now, broadening what instruments we learn from can have a really interesting impact on our guitar playing. I'm very fortunate to play in a band with a trumpet player, Mr. Johnny Bruce, and accompanying him And listening to his solos has really inspired me to listen to more trumpet players, with my own favourites being Chet Baker, Jonah Jones and Louis Armstrong. But what as a guitar player can you get from listening to other instruments and trying to imitate them? Well, I think it disrupts patterns and, for want of a better word, guitaristic ways of thinking about harmony on the fretboard. It will force you to think so much more about notes rather than, what shape are they using here? The greatest thing for me though is rhythm. Brass players need to breathe between phrases, meaning they sometimes have a lot more space than, say, most guitar players might do. The very fact they are breathing also means I think they make much more conscious decisions about the volume of each note. And rather than, say, the guitarist way, where we might have a default picking volume or not even think about the volume we're playing at, and it's just we're focusing far too much on what we're playing, not how we're playing it. Ultimately, I found imitating other instruments led to me being more creative with my phrasing and how I use dynamics. It all had a big impact on the way I played melodies and how I would phrase from one idea to the next in a solo. Now, if you're boring yourself with how you play melodies, I suggest you study solos and transcribe other instruments and pay really close attention, not to just the notes and the rhythm, but also to how they play, and see how you can mimic that on the guitar. Now, it's easy to think that we're missing one piece of advice, that one piece of musical wisdom that will help everything click or complete the jigsaw puzzle of learning and studying jazz guitar. The truth is that learning jazz is never ending. Well, it is, I think, if you're approaching it with the right creative mindset. A standard is never completed. A song will never stop offering up more ways of interpreting it if you look hard enough. It's why the greats often record a standard multiple times throughout their career. An important piece in that jigsaw is realising that often we focus too much on harmony. What notes we play, what scale to use, how we use arpeggios, but it's only half of the picture. The other half being rhythm can make all the difference to how convincing any idea comes across. Where you place notes can make a dull idea sound great. Now, rhythm is the rhythmic values we play, but it's also the rest and silence you leave. When you don't play is as important as when you do. And it's easy to look at a chart and see each bar as needing to be filled with ideas. And you can obviously fill the space, and sometimes it's right to do so, but all of the time will be dull. It'll be dull to listen to. Listeners need the space to reflect on your ideas and to help you take them on the story and the journey of your solo. But it takes confidence to, say, play one note in 2 bars or to leave several bars silent, but it's a lot easier than cramming in tons of ideas and notes everywhere. So if you find that you're just working on harmonic ideas, don't neglect the other half, the rhythm. Your soloing will suffer if you don't take care of the whole package. Now, that might happen to be the one piece of the jigsaw you need to work on right now. But just remember that it might feel like there's always a piece of the jigsaw missing. Because this is such a creative endeavour, there's always new ways you can approach playing. Artists you've not heard of yet, you might be inspired by. You might end up with playing with others, and that introduces new things you need to learn, new skills you need to learn. There's so many songs, we can't learn all of them, there's not enough time. And jazz is such a demanding style to learn. It can be intimidating, it can certainly be frustrating. And I think it's important that we do make progress, but it's far more important that we are aware that we're on a process and a journey with our playing, and that we enjoy that process and just have fun making and practicing music. Now, if you need to work on some of the things I've discussed today, then here's 2 videos on the screen to help you. One on my process to learn a melody, and the second, the basics of rhythm and feeling the beat. 2 very important skills. Now, if you've gained value from today's video, please consider leaving a comment or hitting that like button. Don't forget jazz guitar lessons with myself, Andy, every Wednesday. Until next time, you take care.